Okay, welcome back everyone. It's 5/23 of 2015. We get to shift gears again. Professor Lacocque is turning over the floor to Professor Paul Ricoeur. And obviously, Ricoeur recognized what we recognize when reading the presentation by Lacocque, and that there is very little to add to Lacocque's presentation. It was really brilliant, a tremendous presentation. And Ricoeur really only wants to address the second moment of the rabbinic interpretation. So he, rather than jumping into an overview right away, his essay begins with strictly addressing the moment of rabbinic interpretation of the unveiling of that incarnate Kephale alignment wisdom and the writing of narrative. So we're going to take a look at that second moment. He does have three moments, obviously, of proclamation of the prescriptive commands, and then the program of interpretation, and then transcendence as a theonomy of recognition as gift. So of course he has three moments. He's going to eventually reach that transcendence that Lacocque spoke of. But he wants to give all of his attention initially to the middle moment. He's going to begin his essay at the middle moment. And it's interesting because he also appreciated the fact that Lacocque took up Hagel in the theological summary at the end. But what I love about Ricoeur is Ricoeur says, of course we're going to take up Hagel. No one can get around Hegel. Hegel, you cannot go around him, even if you disagree with him. You cannot get around Hegel. So of course we're going to take up Hegel. But Ricoeur says we live in a world in the 21st century where Hegel has been fragmented, or in the postmodern language, Hegel has been deconstructed. And so what I love about this beginning of the essay by Ricoeur is that his project, and you should understand this, his project is reconstruction. He is not a postmodern. Ricoeur was not a postmodern. He was a hermeneutic philosopher that tried to reach a level of universality that didn't tie in specifically with the postmodern school. And of course his academic assistant was Jacques Derrida, the postmodern, and Ricoeur and Derrida had their differences. They obviously had differences, but the project for Ricoeur here is going to be to take the fragmented Hegel, and we're going to work up the second moment as a reconstruction after the deconstruction moment of fragmenting Hegel. And the reconstruction is going to take the concept of God out of its postmodern brackets. That's what Ricoeur says. Ricoeur says we're going to take the concept of God out of those brackets that the postmodern thought has put the concept of God into as a minimum, and many times just eliminating the concept of God. Ricoeur says we're going to remove the brackets, and we're going to do a reconstruction, and that reconstruction is going to take up the concept of God as part of the motivational base of attestation that the rabbi interpreters will use when they gather at the dialogue threshold to write their interpretive ethical contribution to the law. So it's a process of reconstruction in the middle moment that Ricoeur wants to take up. So I like that. I like the fact that Professor Ricoeur could have an academic assistant like Jacques Derrida and dialogue with Jacques Derrida and still have difference of opinion and difference of academic or motivational conviction, and still be a energetic and very dedicated team academic scholars. But in this case, we've got a dialogue with a brilliant Hebrew scholar in Lacocque, and Ricoeur obviously appreciates the tremendous essay by Lacocque. He wants to take up the second moment. We're going to take a look at that now. He calls it a program of interpretation that the rabbinic narrative takes up, and it is the double Hegelian moment of negation and preservation. Remember, in the German concept, there is the moment of negation, but it includes the moment of preservation. Also, we don't throw everything out in the moment of negation. It's purification. It's an amplification that purifies and separates, but it does not eliminate. It still takes up preservation, because that which is preserved is going to be transcended. So we begin by recognizing that this narrative moment concerns the Exodus. There's always a remembrance. Narrative always reaches back to the founding event of Exodus prior to any articulation of the command into law with paragraphs. Remember, it's the transition from the particularity of a command to an articulation which results in being the rabbinic law with interpretive paragraphs. It does involve a conjunction. A narrative is the formation of a conjunction between the founding event of Exodus and the rabbinic interpretation. And by doing that methodology, it will reach a status of becoming that paradigm interpretive element that reciprocally is related to the command, to the particular command. Narrative, rabbinic narrative becomes paradigm. Now, Ricoeur brings up the Jewish language, and he says that the conjunction is a conjunction of halakha, prescription, and haggadah, imagination. So it's that coupling. It is that conjunction of the prescriptive particularity and the interpretive law with paragraphs. Autonomy and heteronomy always remain dialectical. The rabbinic interpretation is never simply the Jewish faith trying to remain autonomous in their thought and viewing divine command as a heteronomy. Instead, it's a dialectical process, a reciprocal process. There's no such hard-line division as autonomy and heteronomy. So the task of the narrative is to free up the legalism, is to free up the legislative rigidity of legalism, which in many instances that's the way that the particularity of command is taken up. But rabbinic narrative wants to free up the particularity of command from this legalistic presentation. And that means that the rabbinic position, the rabbinic school, has a phonetic stance of intentionality. They have a phonetic stance of intentionality. Phronesis means intentionality. It's a 5-point. It's always going to be a covenant-based interpretation. It's going to be overwhelmingly ethical. It's going to be reaching toward, but not quite achieving, but reaching toward a desire to encapsulate the universality of the aletheia truth. At least a stretch to try to reach universality. And then the eschaton, the eschatological goal, is always the desire for humanity to reach a correspondence with divine nature in the return to the divine. Space is opened up and available because of the extravagant particularity of the contextual presentation of truth in that what Lacocque defined as the extravagant particularity of the command. That extravagance allows a space for interpretation. Now, the motivational base also informs the rabbinic interpretation. There are 4 aspects of remembrance of the deliverance event, which does inform the motivational base of attestation when the rabbinic school is gathered at the dialogue threshold. And as Ricoeur likes to point out, motivation is testimony, it is attestation. And he says that the rabbinic motivational base of attestation encapsulates 3 motivational attestations. And this is where we get into removing the brackets and reintroducing the concept of God. So if we remove the brackets and take a look at the concept of God as far as the motivational base for the rabbinic interpretation, it begins with the affection of naming God's name, of filling in the content of who is Yahweh. It involves the affection of loving God, where we want to enjoin the concept of Yahweh with the concept from 1 John of God as love. And that creates a response of loving obedience to the divine. And then there's the motivational recognition of the affection of the way of love, understanding that it is the love of God that commands this particularity. It is love of God based. And that is the fundamental motivational guide to all rabbinic interpretation. So the motivational base is a triad which results in viewing creation as continued, as the continuance of the incarnate Kaphale alignment wisdom, of revelation as continued, and the rebirth of the human psyche through that unveiling of the Kaphale alignment wisdom, and a continuance of redemption in the actualization of the telos of soteria incarnate plan of salvation for all of creation. So the rabbinic interpretation confronts the hidden categorical network within particularity, and the rabbinic interpretation simply writes a program of freedom to maintain and to uphold the freedom of that Kaphale alignment wisdom, to give it precedence. So that means limiting the use of a legalism, and it means to use negation to constrain legalism in order to preserve divine freedom. And so we screen out personal finite interests, and that lifts out the presumed universality of the divine freedom in the Kaphale alignment wisdom. So the first moment of this second stage is always juridical. It is negation. Negation lifting out the lexical network of categories of freedom. And it always is a interpretation which references the motivational base of the 3 attestations concerning the divine. And it automatically enjoins the 6th commandment concerning the neighbor with the 1st commandment concerning God. So it is a complete removal of the brackets around the concept of God. Thou shalt not kill is reshaped to Leviticus, love neighbor as self. So there is a true reconstruction that is being proposed here by Ricoeur after the destructive negation to separate out the important lexical signs that are categories of the telos of that Kaphale alignment wisdom. The rabbi will then engage in a preservation of gathering up that lexical content into a semantic identity. And so with it, we have this room as a workspace for the interpretation, and it is a separating out of the categories that sustain the divine freedom over and against a legalistic interpretation of command. But then it is an enchaining and an enjoining of all of those lexical categories based on a preservation of semantic identity. And that semantic identity, of course, is going to be the language of Kaphale alignment wisdom. That's your semantic center point. The semantic center point is Kaphale. Remember, it's Kaphale, not Sophia. It's it's linked up with Sophia, but Kephale emphasizes the alignment of the divine wisdom, of the incarnate, impregnated wisdom that is existing in creation and moving forward. So it is Sophia wisdom, but it is defined with the concept of Kephale because it is alignment. It aligns the chaos. It aligns the negativity. It aligns that disruption, and it brings things into the order of God's wisdom. So it is Kephale. It is Kephale that becomes the semantic unity. So it gives us